thoughts in this? This is pretty informal, and Patty, you are sort of the pivotal person, yay, for a lot of this.
Right.
And can you guys see my notes here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I guess one of the big questions that I had is, what is the status of NDEP? And then I was thinking about what are our information needs pending that? And some other questions sort of down at the end, like what's our deliverable actually going to be? What are lessons from the states, et cetera. So Patty, would you mind catching us up on where you're at?
So with the hub and spoke, basically, was that the question? Yep. Okay. So we did a couple of the online or, virtual meetings, but then Skylar Jones and I actually took a trip down the Highway 50 corridor. And we did not get to we were hoping to do a couple other trips, but we're still planning on it, but we haven't done those. But the 50 corridor one was really very interesting and kind of eye-opening. And that actually made me think, oh, maybe what we need is the corridor hub, kind of think of it more linearly along that route. It's at least that one. But, or, make a circle, I don't know. Anyway, but the challenge is, so all of the spoke communities are on board, and our problem was kind of with Ely, the city of Ely. We being NDP gave them a couple grants over, the last 4 years, 3-4 years to cover their baler. So they had a baler to cover the baler and to provide storage for the material, but then they quit. The only thing they're collecting is aluminum, and they don't have, so their recycling center is basically kind of shut down, and that was a city council decision, is what I was told. So what we need to, what they were asking for our help with was kind of coming up with a presentation to the city council, because they want it to pay for itself, and they're just landfilling cardboard like crazy, which is very disheartening. The other problem, so they had some other infrastructure needs there at their landfill and recycling center site. They when they put up the structures, so basically, they're like the curved covers, and they don't have a back, and the prevailing winds come in through the back. And so they kind of need a back on that. And then they were asked, it's like, well, for asking for things, they would like a forklift. So I think, that was one thing we wanted to find out, is like, what do people have and what do they need, out there. And so, so they need help. So one of the other things that came out of that, the whole trip, we stopped in, I guess I'll, kind of back up. We stopped in Fernley, Fallon, Austin, Ely and Eureka and Baker, Nevada, which is where Great Basin is, right? The Great Basin, the Baker businesses and Great Basin National Park are very interested in recycling. Yeah. And they have a drop off, for their waste, their garbage. They just have bins. And we watched, as we were there, someone pulls up and like loads it up with cardboard. So yeah, so it's like, okay, what if you just had a cardboard bin? But that's the problem. So the problem is out there, of course, is transportation, right? Getting it to somewhere. And so we were very fortunate we had Bo Peck from Interwest Paper actually came out to Baker and met us. There's Wes.
Hey, good morning,
Wes. Where's he's on yet?
Morning.
So I was just kind of doing a rundown of our Highway 50 hub and spoke trip that I took with Skylar Jones, who's our education coordinator, in September. So Bo met us out there, and he actually has worked with a lot of the rural recyclers in Nevada, in kind of eastern Nevada. But even with him, it's like the problem is, the transportation, getting getting it, getting the material picked up. So I guess that's what we really need to look at, is how to get get a route. But we have to collect
Right.
material, what material, and all that. But there is a lot of interest, and Eureka is very interested in. One of the problems that they have there is that their landfill is very constrained, and so they don't have anywhere to expand. So they
That's
actually
right.
they just bought a baler from Interwest, and they have one just for cardboard and one just for the aluminum. So they're very interested in working with us. But like I said, it's kind of the Ely piece on that route,
Right.
and then the transportation.
Right.
So the next step that we're going to do, we're going to apply for. We use funds from a USDA Rural Utilities grant. And so we're going to apply for that grant again. The deadline is the end of the year, and then put in. So it actually wasn't for this hub and spoke project. It was for something else. But with COVID, we kind of had to pivot, and we wanted to spend some of that money, and they let us, use it for that purpose. So that was really good. But we're going to actually put it into the grant this time. So the next one, we want to do like a I-80 corridor trip, and then a 95, and really get out, because it's one thing to talk to people in a virtual meeting and say, yeah, this is what we'd like to do, but once you get out there and really talk to them and look at what they have, and like we went to Fernley transfer station, and they have a recycling bin, but it doesn't even have a label on it.
Right. Yep.
And it's like, so just things like that. And like at Fallon, they had a fire at their transfer station some time ago, but they'd still not reopened. And so they have a temporary site in town, which the people love because it's like right in town. So it's like, but then I talked to them, and they're like, well, they're collecting material, but it's not going anywhere. So, it's they really want to do this. That's the thing. Is how really make it happen.
Well, for your road trips, are you guys also going to do a trip down 93 from Ely? Well, you don't have to go straight down 93, but like Ely, Pioche, Caliente. I know Caliente is really trying to do more with the mountain biking and bringing tourism in. So this seems like they might be interested. They're pretty small communities, but no smaller than Eureka or Austin.
Right. Well, we had, our original plan was to go that way, and then we kind of changed to do the 50. So yeah, we could. I'm sure that would be fine. I would love to go out there. Yeah. So I think we need at least 3 more trips.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, I want to come with you because I love to drive, and I love
okay. Yeah. Oh, that would be great. Yeah, we could set up a trip from Vegas back up to Ely and talk to them.
I go this way a lot, or that way a lot for fun. So
yeah.
Okay. Well, I think this is helpful to me. Other folks, what do you have questions about as we kind of digest the information that Patty provided?
I guess one of the questions I'd have is, especially from the state perspective for permitting and what they're doing in these other areas, or what are their constraints to being able to implement some of the recycling projects and things like that. I know that the public is always interested in it, but there's different constraints for businesses and obviously transportation and stuff. So what are their issues with not being able to effectively get some of it going?
Well, I mean, we were talking to public works guys, and so we didn't really talk to the public. We were talking to the transfer station and those guys. So that's the problem. It's like siting, but that's what we were really looking at. Siting at an existing facility, and the transportation is the hugest problem right now.
Yeah.
Bo was saying, oh, well, if you get those, people who are delivering stuff to backhaul, and he made a couple of inquiries, and, especially the ones with food that are delivering food, they can't
No.
back haul them. So,
but that's a good point about deadheading loads. And looking at the rules, it seems like the rules are currently pretty straightforward and not onerous in these areas to add balers or to add a recycling bin or something like that. And perhaps that's something that the permitting group from NDEP should weigh in on, is what direction they see this going. Is there a way to facilitate this and make this a pretty simple application process?
Yeah, I don't think it's that it's prohibited. I mean, most of them actually have done some recycling in the past. Another kind of thing that I've been thinking about is with the plastics, because at least 3 companies have contacted us looking for sourcing plastic for in the state. And so, if we could get them, it's a mixed bag, because one of them, they would need it processed, like flaked. So we don't have a processor. Another one, they could take like all the mixed plastic we have and more, and they don't need it, and they do the processing themselves. So that to me is a real opportunity for the state if we can figure out, get some of this recycling going. Because if we could source separate,
right,
and not have to send it to the MRF for that, we could skip a kind of a costly step there. So I don't know what you think.
Yeah. The trouble is just with the hauling, because plastic in particular is so light, you need a lot of it to make it make sense.
Right.
That said, it needs further discussion. It absolutely warrants further discussion. The nice thing about single stream, as much as I kind of hate it from the contamination standpoint, is you just put it all in one truck. So the logistics are a little bit more straightforward. And the bins and the siting is a little bit more straightforward. But if there are people that specifically want to be here, I think that's a good thing. And that was one of my questions, is how to get it back to the MRF or back to the hub, and where are those? Obviously, I think trucking for now is going to be the key point. And I almost think it would be worth reaching out to some of the haulers to see if they would want to weigh in on this. We could talk to our hauler down here. I'm sure there are trash haulers or recycling haulers up north. But they do over the road hauling, not just local hauling. But what are the hubs? So not just a MRF, but what other locations would take this material? And I don't have those answers. I don't know what those are.
Yeah, I mean, if we could send it down to you guys, that would be,
take it.
If it works.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, we'd love it. But this is,
I think one of the issues that would need to be researched and likely through the state would be to figure out, from a hauler perspective, in order to make it, obviously it has to be profitable for a business to do some of this work. So from a hauler perspective, what would they need to have it to make it worthwhile to go to Ely, to go through Fallon, to go through Elko and make these hauls? And I think you need to set some clear goals that would help establish that business route.
Right. Are you talking about density of material, like weight?
Either or. I think it would kind of depend on what that hauler was looking for. So if it's pure plastic, like you said, is it going to be density? Do they need it baled? What is it that would make them be willing to do it? Because that's one of the arguments, is that we don't have a transportation corridor that gets it from there to here or vice versa. And so obviously there needs to be some product, an amount of product that makes it worthwhile for that company to go out there and pick it up. And so I think that that's a great way to start the conversation over, okay, so we need company A to be able to go out to Ely. In order for company A to go out to Ely, they need X amount of these things here. So Ely, what do we need to do to get X amount of these things here? And how do we build that into the process to make this start to actually affect change?
Right.
over
That's a
time,
great point. And
the
I added
amount
in there,
goes up.
I added in there density of routes too, Wes, because I think density of the haul is important, but the way to do this is to do it where you have like a milk run and you stop at every location, and the more of those that are out there and not too far off the beaten path, the better it'll be. The tricky thing is going to be paying for it too, because the haulers aren't going to do this for free. The cities, sounds like especially Ely, want to make this a financial benefit somehow, or at least a net neutral cost. So that's going to be
Nobody's going to do
very
this for
difficult.
free.
That's right.
And
Right.
that's one of the things I think that everybody has to realize, and I think what kind of came out of our conversation, was it yesterday, the day before, that
Yeah.
there is not going to be any money that's going to come and subsidize creating more recycling in the state unless Nevada starts printing its own coin. And so the counties are not going to be able to subsidize it. We know that Republican Waste Management are not going to do it for free. And why would they? They're a business. They're in the same realm. So there needs to be some sort of either an incentive at the state level for maybe the more recycling you get more funding for certain types of programs. Local level, or is there some type of tax structure that helps them get a percentage off or something like that, where some of these businesses would actually, or more likely counties and agencies that manage it, is there some sort of incentive, or do we start tying it into franchise agreements? If you don't perform at this level, your franchise agreement gets tagged. And, there's multiple avenues to take it. I'm certainly not promoting any one more than any of the others, other than maybe the franchise one, because I think that one would probably work the best for me locally, but I don't know that that works for everybody else locally.
Well, and I don't know what areas have franchise and what are open market, right? So
I know the two areas up here. My two areas up here that are the biggest population base are franchise agreements. So
right.
We have one. All of Washoe County is a franchise. It's 3 separate franchise agreements, which makes it unique. I don't know how Las Vegas does theirs.
We have 4.
Okay.
Yeah, so kind of the same, yeah.
So we're in the same boat. And then Carson Douglas has a franchise agreement now too. So in a sense, you're talking about for lack of a better term, you're probably talking about the largest population base in the state right there in this one corridor area, where if you were to tag it with a franchise agreement where somehow, part of the arrangement is that you have to actually hit the state goal for recycling and have methodologies to do that. Because one of the issues is going to be for your plastics company. One, they need the plastic in order for it to be financially feasible for them to be here. So we need to figure out, one, how do we get them the plastic in order for them to even want to be here?
Yeah, exactly.
If we don't start figuring out how to get them the resources, it's not going to happen voluntarily.
No, it's not. And
and then
sorry,
you were mentioning the franchise fees and, the franchise agreements, but so in that they get some franchise fees. And so if we could dedicate some of that to actually supporting the projects, because, most of the franchise fees do not go toward, it's like our tire fund. It doesn't go toward tires,
No, the franchise agreement goes to the counties and the cities. And so what I would be looking at would be something along the lines of saying, okay, counties and cities, you need to focus on making these aspects, on attaining these goals. And if you don't, then X percentage of your franchise agreement gets taken.
Well, and I think we need to walk through that with some other folks that are real familiar with how these are done, to make sure we've got some good arrangements in them. But one thing that I was thinking of are host fees. Every landfill, every privately owned landfill anyway, pays a host fee to the local community. And so if we tackled that, and I can't believe my colleagues in the waste business would shoot me for saying this, but adding on host fees could be another way to pay for this. And at a place where your landfill life is restricted, this makes a lot of sense because you're extending the life of the landfill. But I think, and I need to do some more research, but I think that most of the landfills in the state are publicly owned, as in owned by counties. So they may not have a host fee agreement with their local community. But
I'm not sure how ours up here works, Patty. Does that have a host fee?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't work on that side, but that
I bet
is
you that one does.
So there's also a fee where it's a flat rate. So we tried to get years and years ago, we tried to get tipping fee, and that didn't fly. But they got the fee, like the annual fee. Well, I don't remember what they call it, the solid waste fee. So just looking at that, maybe we can get, it's a flat rate depending on the class of the landfill, right? So I think it's like 60,000 for class ones,
right?
Something like that. Right. So maybe looking at getting some of that funding to be dedicated to the recycling, or increasing it somewhat. I don't know if we could just do that through the regs, if we'd have to do it through, that.
I think one of the challenges. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. I was just going to say one of the challenges is going to be Northern Nevada. We have 2 landfills in the region, for lack of a better term. Neither of them are in Washoe County. So one of the drawbacks to a proposal where we're focusing on the landfills is then Washoe County is the largest population base, and the same for Carson, because the other landfill is not even in Carson. Neither one of us would be able to control, would be able to essentially provide an assist or a lift to ensure the recycling was completed. You'd be relying on Story County for recycling rates out of Washoe County.
Yeah.
And and Lyon County, I think, has the other one, doesn't it? Is it Lyon or Story? I know Story has one. Story has Lockwood.
The one that's
or is the other one in
Fallon? I think it might be
I've got
Carson
that on the map. Hang on a second, guys. I've got that on a map in the state.
Carson has a landfill, but there's also one in near Fallon. Russell Pass.
Russell
Pass.
Russell Pass is another one. So so there are those other ones, but I think the biggest issue I would see is the local jurisdiction up here we'd have nothing to do with that with this type of a format. We would not be able to influence, regulate, or ensure that recycling was done. All you'd be able to do is rely on the numbers that came back, and unfortunately I don't know that there's any oversight really.
That is a weird relationship that you have. So you have the solid waste, but you don't have the landfill. So
yep. So we work with Waste Management on certain aspects, and we were trying to get them to move forward with that compost out there. But it becomes a interesting challenge, because we have the waste, but once it crosses the county line and goes out, we don't have it anymore.
Right.
Is there any way to change that through a memorandum of understanding or other legal mechanism, or would there be any appetite for that?
Historically, we used to actually oversee the landfill. That went away because Story County realized that they would get money for having the landfill. That is not going to happen.
Okay.
I mean, maybe if somebody were able to actually break through, but I don't think that Story County would be game.
And you're talking about the little Carson City landfill down here. I've driven by that one.
Lockwood.
Lockwood.
No,
right,
yeah, Lockwood. Yeah, Lockwood's in Story.
Lockwood's in Story. Whoops,
We
sorry guys.
used to actually oversee Lockwood.
That's right. So that's a big hurdle then, are overseeing that. But I think this is something we need to explore more, are the ways to use franchise agreements or host fees or other incentives. I really like the idea of incentives at a state level to fund programs in the county if certain thresholds are met. Right? That's an incentive that's not a big stick necessarily, but it's more of a carrot. And I don't know exactly how that might work, but I could see in some of the rural communities, it may make more sense to be like, oh yeah, so we could get more money for whatever X is, maybe it goes into some kind of slush fund, so to speak. And then if we meet these recycling targets, I think that would be a really good one.
I think one of the goals would be you could actually push it towards even education and trying to, do more environmental education, sustainability education.
Yeah.
It all falls into play because it actually, these kind of things to me are some of the most effective and reproducible, because what happens when we do a tie-in like that, then it puts onus on the locals that are making those decisions with the franchises, with, like, let's say Waste Management and Republic. So
right.
there's now an incentive at that level, but not just that. Now, as you're providing education, the work for Republic, I'm using Republic and Waste Management because they're the two biggest ones, and Jessica's on the phone. So it's like it helps their processes move forward in a more efficient and cleaner manner too. So what we have essentially done is we've attacked it on two levels. We have gone into the education component at the local level or in the county or city structure, and we are starting to affect change for the actual businesses that are having to do the pickup. So in a way, it's a win-win. It is tied, and there can be some fees and goals and things like that. But the more we help on one, the more success you see on the other. So it's a win-win on both sides. The businesses that are collecting end up getting more collections, and hopefully, if everything's working correctly, cleaner collections. So then less loss of product, which then goes to the end consumer, i.e. your plastics company that wants to move in can now have all the plastics they actually need. And then we can focus on a method of them getting those plastics.
Right. And if the corridors are already established, that should be a fairly easy thing for KW Plastics to send one of their trucks down the way, Wiley Sanders' truck, right? They're out there all the time.
And it becomes far more feasible when there's enough product that makes that hauling worthwhile. Because if there isn't enough product to make the hauling worthwhile, somebody's overpaying.
And that's where I feel like we have to really leverage some of these other facilities that are out there as collection points. I was sharing the screen with the map of the state. This is from the state solid waste plan, so I assume it's still current or current-ish. And there's a fair number of, waste bin facilities, which I consider as convenience centers, a fair number of transfer stations, and some small landfills around the state. But using that and then overlaying where our federal facilities are, like Great Basin National Park, Ruby Marsh National Wildlife Refuge, all of those kinds of places, U.S. Forest Service headquarters or office locations, BLM, those locations have a federal requirement to recycle, and they're not necessarily doing it. And I think there's starting to be more and more appetite to do so, at least talking to some of the federal folks I know. So I think that would be a way to maybe increase the capture of these materials. And it's not that expensive to set a 6-yard, for example, out in the middle of nowhere at a waste bin collection center. Whether it's contaminated or results in illegal dumping, we can talk through that. But I feel like that would be an option to increase that density of routes, density of material.
Well, right. That's what we were, that's what the hub and spoke is.
Yeah.
The whole idea. And we do have, so we made some maps. Have you seen our maps Oh,
No,
Ooh, can you
yeah,
share?
we have some really awesome maps. So we
Yay!
kind
that's
of,
actually going
we
to.
took, yeah, our IT GIS person made us, so we have like a state map showing possible hubs, and then, God, I have to find them. I'm
Oh
surprised
yeah.
I haven't, yeah, so what she did was take, and with all the waste bins and transfer stations and stuff, and we made, so like kind of like what New Mexico did, you identify the larger communities, and then you go like, so we went 60 miles out, and so whatever, from the hub, and see what's captured in that. And so I can send you guys all those
That would be
maps.
wonderful.
So I mean, so we have partners with BLM. There's like three different, at least three offices that are in our hub and spoke stakeholder group already. And then, like you said, Great Basin, there, the cost isn't necessarily a big factor. They can help put some money toward it. And they actually have their own balers and stuff already. They have, yeah, they had some problem, like they were collecting paper and for like a year, and the mice got in it. And so there's like, okay, that's a bad idea.
No, you need to go a little faster than that.
Yeah, but there are ways. And then the other one is the tribal communities. So they also have mandates to do recycling, or whatever they call them. They have that for gap funding and whatnot. So they do have some, like when we went to Ely, we went and visited the tribal community there, and there aren't very many houses. There's like a handful of houses there, but they actually collect and separate and weigh all of their recyclables and then take them to the landfill. And so they're very frustrated.
Yeah, that's heartbreaking. Yeah, because that's so much time, right?
Yeah. So and then from each of the hubs, we made maps, separate maps showing all the locations within them. And so that's kind of what our plan was, with these visits, is to go out to both the hubs, community, possible hubs. We call them hubs, but they're like probable hubs, to go to those communities and the spoke communities and talk to them about how they can work together, and I mean, I think the next step for us, besides doing our, visits out there, is to actually do, meetings with all of the stakeholders at each of the hub, and, each hub at least. And, we've worked with Elko quite a bit. I don't know, at least they're up on a rail line too, up that way. So there is some, I don't know if we've talked about that before, but there is some talk about with NDOT on their rail program. So that might be a ways out, but it could be something, to keep our fingers in. And I talked to Dominique Etchegoyen. He's the assistant, or whatever they call him, director of DCNR. And I was talking to him about that. And that same day he got a message from them, and he's like, so he's got his eye on that as well. So, it's like, yeah, keep us in mind,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that the rail option is really useful, but the problem is the end facility has to have access to it. So like our MRF in North Las Vegas, there's no way that would work for us. Now, Apex landfill sits on a rail spur, so, that could work, except the entire footprint at Apex is going to be landfill at some point. So building a facility there, a new facility, would be pretty tough. So yeah, I think that's a deal. Before I forget, do we want, and this is sort of a housekeeping note, do we want to have like a shared drive where we send these documents to, or because the group is kind of small, email works? How would you like to do that? Because Wes, I did see your comment, and Patty's committed to share those other maps too.
Email works for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, same.
Okay, cool.
No offense, I'm going to probably have a hard time keeping up with all the shared docs.
Yeah.
I
know, right? Okay, cool. And Wes, you had your hand up. What's up?
So you had actually just stated something that I think also needs to be addressed as part of the hub and spoke model, and as we move forward in and even if we start talking about incentivizing and things like that, are illegal dump sites, because nobody has the actual funding for it. And so the county here, like for me, I don't fund illegal dump sites necessarily. I do fund ATMB cleanups, and they do take care of some of those illegal dump sites, but only within a reasonable area as well. And so I think that's a component that as we move forward, when we start talking about making these changes and doing this, there is going to be a certain proportion of our population that is going to continue to illegally dump. And I think we need to find a way at the state level to assist in helping all of us find ways to manage some of that illegal dumping. And either the counties are the ones that get some funding, and we have X amount of dollars to deal with to assist other agencies with cleanups, and we go and we pay for the containers and hauling and this and that, and we figure out how to do those things, or some sort of a methodology to deal with those aspects of it, because I do think it becomes a holistic approach. If we're going to attack one, we should look at addressing the whole picture. I'm not sure if that's necessarily, I think it does fall into part of the hub and spoke model. It falls into, it's like a weird amoeba thingy, because it moves around and it depends on which area is getting hit the most. But I know that up here, BLM has over 80 cars that are just sitting out that can't get moved, and they just end up holding trash from everybody else. So it becomes not just a vehicle dump, but just a trash dump at that point.
This is one of my biggest pet peeves in life, is illegal dumping. And I think that it is prevalent across the state, regardless of landowner. BLM seems to bear the brunt of it because those lands butt up against populated areas a little more. Around Vegas, it's heinous. There are places where it is just awful. Illegal dumping of medical waste. I can go on. So I like the idea, and maybe this is something that could be tied into the incentive structures, whether that's state solid waste fees or something like that. And then I have to wonder if there's not anything from the EPA or that would be in any other federal dollars. I don't know anything about that universe, the funding mechanisms, but I think this is something we need to bring up, and I'm really glad you did. I thought that this is kind of just one of my pet peeves, so I wanted to avoid mine. But
well, and I think the biggest issue with illegal dumping is none of us have the staff or the support to be able to actually address it personally. So it truly becomes a funding issue where we need to have the funds available to literally pay someone else to do the job, to go out and get it and clean it up. And it's cost. And I think that there's something to that effect, whether we change my initial comment from like, okay, maybe we try and support education, but we say we're going to support, illegal cleanups, and we funnel that into an educational component, or we do something like that, or I mean, I'll take the hit. You guys can make me do a presentation to the state or whatever on how much cleanup we did and how many tons we do, all those kind of things from the local standpoint to validate the funding that we get. I have no problem with those things. I just think that at some point it is an elephant in the room that we can do all we want for recycling and cleanup, but we need to figure out, I think, a holistic approach as we move forward. And it's just something that's been missing.
I think that's brilliant. We haven't talked about that in any of the sustainability groups I've been a part of, and that is something that's out there. And I feel like that could be a direct, clear benefit to the communities if they had a way to clean that up, because presumably nobody likes seeing their, landscape around their city or their town being dumped on. Now, I think that controlling the illegal dumping at the drop-off locations, I was envisioning could be controlled somewhat if we're using facilities that are already at least partially manned or staffed, whether that's at an office building, whether that's at a convenience center or a transfer station. I want to believe that people are going to be less likely to dump illegally at those locations, but that's not necessarily true. We had a recycling drop-off at our recycling facility for the local community, And those schmucks were coming in with TVs and mattresses and putrescible waste and med waste and just dumping it all at the gate and then putting it in the 40-yard for the single stream, despite the signage, despite the cameras, despite somebody in a scale shack 50 feet away. So that's one piece. I finally just took it away and we're doing it differently now. But I think that I like what you're saying a lot. And I think that would go a long way to sort of encouraging the federal facilities to say yes to having a recycle bin at their location. And, you know, Clark County we could maybe talk to Clark County because they have an illegal dumping program that is severely understaffed, severely underfunded, but they have an existing mechanism somehow. And that may be worth talking to them. Wes, what do you think?
I would agree. I just think that as a state, we all focus in each of our areas on, you know, the recreational opportunities and our wide open spaces. And I think that this is a component to tie into as we talk about realistically increasing rules for recycling and things like that across the state and how to make those things more functional. Mm-hmm. If we come back with the opposite, with the other component of saying, as part of this, we're also going to do these things and we're going to figure out funding sources to address these components, then I think it helps balance that scale a little bit more because, I mean, we're all still Nevada. We have a component of why we love this state and why we want to be here. And I think that we have to recognize that our communities do too. Mm-hmm. And hopefully there's a way to balance that enough that, yes, we are growing. We don't get to just always be the same as we once were. But so in us doing one process, we're going to try and address another one that's rampant, and we all know it's there, and right. none of the communities like it, but none of them are going to go out and fund to clean.
That's right. And this would be a way of sort of taking it would be a way of managing the message. I guess maybe I'm overly sensitive, but I've spent so much time in rural areas and I kind of feel like I have sometimes an idea of what the general attitude is about recycling or being an environmentalist. Well, that's not for us, right? We're conservatives over here, but nobody wants to see illegal dumping. Nobody wants to drive their, OHV when they're going deer hunting past an illegal dump site, presumably. At least the people I talk to don't. And so I feel like that could be a way of really bridging the message around the recycling program, and not just, we're going to recycle because it's good for the planet. That's not going to really do much for people. But saying, hey, recycling is going to help fund this. I'm sorry?
It aids in the education.
Yep.
It helps educating. And when we reduce the locations of illegal dumping, that educational component kicks in because they're no longer as willing to do it.
Well, I guess the part of the thing with talking with Ely was, you also have to make the economic case for it, that it's not, like you said, it's not just a green thing or saving the earth. It's like, no, it actually makes economic sense because, we can create jobs in rural communities. We can create, the recycling brings in a lot of dollars to the state, and just to show them that. And so, if we can get some of the numbers together to show them that, this is actually makes economic sense, not just, giving us some brownie points or whatever.
Well, I'd be happy to provide what I can about the number of people we employ at our facility, about what our annual revenue is over there. We could certainly talk through some of that. And not that somebody's going to build the largest MRF in the country in Ely, but that would be a way of saying, hey, this does happen. One thing that we haven't talked about is if there were a way to have like mini hubs for some sort of low-level processing or sorting if that was needed. You could use people from prisons. You could use people, if the county's running it. Republican Waste, I can tell you right now, have no interest in dealing with the optics around using prison labor. Or, for example, I was talking to somebody yesterday who was involved with a project in Fulton, Missouri, where they were using developmentally disabled people from the local psych facility. There was a big local psych facility, and this was sort of a job training. And evidently it went really, really well. She worked there at the, she was involved with the recycling program, but she worked at the psych facility. And she was saying how this was a way to teach people some basic skills and interpersonal skills. So there could be potential for, I don't know if that's even a thing, but I know there's a prison up near Ely, but if they had like work release programs and things like that, that worked really well in Marshall County.
Well,
County guy started using them for his own property.
so Department of Corrections, actually, they are on our radar because they create a lot of waste.
I bet.
So that was actually when I first started, we did a meeting in Ely because the mayor at that time was horrified by how much cardboard the prison was bringing to their landfill. And so we actually met with that warden, and she was when we first walked into the room, she was very closed and, about it. And by the time she left, she was very excited. The problem with Ely is it's a maximum security, so they don't have many inmates that can, but they do have conservation camps nearby.
Right.
And so I think the prisons is a huge opportunity, but they are really super short staffed right now. So I've reached out. I reach out to lots of people that never answer me, and I've tried with them a little, but I think, like I said, they're just so swamped because they don't have enough, guards and stuff right now.
That was one thing that was so great about working in Tennessee is every county had its own jail, and that was typically in the county seat or in the largest community, and they wanted work release programs for their inmates. And the one in Marshall County that was so successful, they ran a very rough sort MRF, and I mean, it was very bare bones, but the prisoners loved coming there. That was close to one of our landfills, so I was there all the time. I knew the guy really well, the county solid waste manager, and he grew this huge garden, and they loved coming there because he fed them a fresh lunch. He would give them fresh vegetables pretty much year round because he had a greenhouse. And that worked wonderful, like I said, up until he started using the inmates for labor at his own personal property. Yeah. And he ultimately lost his job, and they had to shut the place down. And that was really unfortunate, but it did, it sounds stupid, but it did teach some of those folks skills like how to resolve conflict in a nonviolent way when you're at work. And so it was a good thing. And I wonder if there's any possibility of doing that if we get to phase 2 and build some of those little mini sorting facilities.
Yeah, I think it's possible for sure. So I did send you guys all the maps. I just sent you an email that has all the maps, so you can see what we've done. And like you were talking about from Vegas to Ely, there's a big hole currently over there. That's our only hole.
Well,
but it is a low population area, and we just haven't gone out there. So
how about Lund? I love Lund. Or well, anyway, I got married.
We'll work on them.
That's right. So a couple of quick things, because I know we're running out of time and I'm talking a lot. I think we need to figure out a deliverable, and my thought, and please tell me if I'm wrong on this, but my thought would be we would develop a set of plans or recommendations fleshing this stuff out even more to the overall Partners for Sustainable Nevada and NDEP. And some of this may be part of recommendations to a state solid waste management plan change or rule changes. Is that what everybody's thinking? I see heads nodding. So
okay.
Yeah,
cool.
I would agree with that.
Good. And I'm going to delete this funding mechanisms question because we're talking through that. I think we owe it to ourselves to kind of talk through that. And that sounds good. When would you guys like to meet next? I think we need to talk to haulers. I think we need to talk to maybe some people that know more about franchise agreements, and I can certainly talk to my people. And I'll have to probably give them a Valium so they don't have a stroke thinking about adding stuff to the franchise agreement that's going to cost money. But, so what are our next steps, and when would you guys like to meet?
I would, just as a quick comment, I have absolutely no way to deal with a franchise agreement because they're not even in my realm.
Gotcha. You know anybody at the county that works on those?
Yeah, I know who. It's.
I know who.
Yeah.
I know who at the county does. but I don't know who at each city jurisdiction. And I think that those comments might end up leading to more pushback up front, I think, unless we have flushed out ideas.
Okay.
So my personal opinion would be, at this point, I think it'd be easier to talk about options of ways to increase engagement at the city and county levels with those people that have franchise agreements versus ping the people that have franchise agreements to find out how much more work they want to do for their money.
Right.
Well, just knowing when they're due. I mean, you know, that
I know
their
when they're
long-term
due.
agreements. You do? You know,
I know when mine are due because I have been pushing on them to do some adjustments. But yeah, see, the health district here, we're not included in the franchise agreement. We don't get any funding out of it.
Right.
Really?
Yeah. So
And I
also make it really easy because anything that comes up with a franchise agreement, I kick right over to each of the agencies and tell them go pound sand, have at it. Because they always want to yell at me to tell me when I have to go in to make somebody be a customer of Waste Management, and I always have to remind them that that's their duty as a franchise agreement.
There you go.
yeah.
So I'm going to put that on you, Wes. Figure out ways to increase engagements with those people. And then I think we need to figure out where the other franchises are. And Patty, maybe you could help me with that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I know a little bit, so I can help for sure.
Okay, cool. We can talk offline. I can talk to the haulers that I know. I was putting in Endurance, MBI, even though they don't really haul in Nevada. And I could also reach out to Wiley Sanders through an old contact, which may or may not be fruitful, but I can at least take a stab at those. Does anybody else know any haulers that might want to chat with us just in broad strokes? Okay.
Not a reliable one.
Do what?
I can talk to the inspector and see what she knows.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I don't
You
have
see
any
his behind.
reliable haulers up here.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we know we have CNS from Pahrump.
Right.
He's a pretty good guy, and then I don't know there's a few, you know, the ones out east we'll have to work on. I know, like, who was it? It was like Fernley. No, Fallon. They have a lot of different haulers.
Yeah, there's probably a lot of small haulers. I was thinking like kind of the over-the-road truckers with the 53-foot transfer trailers.
Yeah.
That's who I would aim for. I have a great relationship with Endurance down here. We've been having so many problems this year getting the trash out. We've gotten to be very good friends now about all of that. I think talking to CNS would make sense at some point, and also Waste Connections. Because they bought the front
I have
disposal.
talked. The Waste Connections guy, we did a bit of work with Elko, and we got the regional representative or whatever he is from Waste Connections. He's out of like Oregon or something, but he's on our stakeholder list. So he was a really good source, definitely.
Dynamite. Well, maybe you and I can talk offline about Elko and about the other potentials that are out there.
And CNS is kind of doing their own hub and spoke already. They go up to Beatty, and that's as far north as they go. So we were kind of looking at over there was doing like a feeding. You can do a spoke to a spoke, then to a hub kind of thing, like getting, so the smaller places like Tonopah and Goldfield, if we could get their stuff down to Beatty, and then they actually do, CNS has their own sort. I don't know what I haven't seen it, but they do sort some. Yeah. So we should definitely do a trip there.
Yep.
Well, CNS might be a great resource to figuring out what that cost benefit analysis is for their process there. and looking at the mileage and what they would actually need to obtain, that might be a really good option to try and figure out some mechanisms for how to introduce it to other areas or how to expand it.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good
Okay.
point.
Guys, sorry to interrupt. I got to jump on to a 9 o'clock
So do I.
the chair and co-chair meeting.
Us too.
Okay.
Yep. I'll send this out. Would you guys